Thank you for joining the Archive Memories and New Turns in Textile conference in this beautiful and symbolic Maison de l'Asie, representing Asia here in Paris, and conference which is in partnership between Asia Society France, Asia Society India, and Printemps Asiatique, of course. Asia Society France, like its 16 other centers around the world, aims at reinforcing the links connecting Asia to the world. We focus on advancing our mission, navigating shared futures for Asia and the world. And we do this by concentrating on three areas: policy, arts and culture, and technology and innovation, or PACT in short. We have been partners with the Printemps Asiatique, which has a mission which is very similar to ours for the last 6 years since we opened in Paris. And every year they bring, in a very spectacular way, making Asian art to make Paris welcome, the international capital of Asia for a week. This conference focuses on a very important area of Asia, the Indian subcontinent. It has always been of interest to the West, but it is, of course, increasingly so in the headlines because of the geopolitics and the market expansion and its export market. The two speakers today will look at the important part of that culture, Bengali textile, with skills going back to the 16th century until today, still used today, and how they tie to the world of fashion. We will also cover how tradition trickled down in India itself, with its role in weddings, in celebrations, in everything in daily life, but also in craftsmanship preservation and knowledge sharing. To do so, we've brought two experts to cover in this conversation. Darshan Shah is the founder of the incredible Weaver Studio and its resource center in Kolkata, West Bengal. She recently launched one of the biggest multi-year projects, Textile from Bengal, a shared legacy, including an exhibition, a symposium, and a publication on Bengal, surprisingly little documented textile history from the 16th to the 20th century, arguably the world's richest textile story. And here with us, miraculously, I want to say, because she's sick, so we appreciate that she came. Aurélie Samuel, a renowned curator of cultural heritage, currently director of art, culture, and heritage at Louis Vuitton. She's also been the director of the collection at Yves Saint Laurent in Paris and in Marrakesh. And she's trained as an art historian specialist in Indian culture. Worked 15 years at Guimet, first in the Japanese department, and then as director of the museum textile department. Both will share their experience and make us navigate through time, skills, and space in this unique past, weaving an intricate story in this unique past and present skills. You can ask questions at any time during the presentation. We're going to have two presentations first and then a discussion. Feel free to ask questions if there is anything. But first, say your name, any organization you represent if needed, and then we can go on from there. And I will leave it to the two experts, which I'm not, on this beautiful topic. We'll begin with Darshan.
I'm just going to say a very good afternoon and good evening to everybody. My heartfelt thanks to Asia Society Paris and to the Maison and the team, Inakshi, Sopti, Ketaki, and the team at Asia Society India, to Jean-Michel Dumont and to Aurélie Samuel, to all those who have joined this afternoon for this session. Thank you very much. You know, when we think about textiles, I don't really see fabric only. I see memory, I see ancestry, and I see a quiet testimony. I'm from Kutch, but I was born and brought up in Bengal, in Kolkata in Bengal. And my grandparents and parents came from Rangoon, from Burma. There were so many things in the house that I grew up with: my grandmother's starched saris, the hum of the sewing machines, and the gleam of carefully folded fabrics in cupboards, and that left a deep impression on me. They were just not objects of beauty or utility, but careers of stories, of migration, or of adaptation, of belonging. Textiles seemed alive and embedded with the spirit of the women who wore it. They mended and they preserved them. Over time, this emotional and sensory connection evolved into a sense of responsibility. When I was looking out at what I would like to do next, or what I thought was my calling, that is when I found that I had a sense of responsibility towards this kind of heritage and culture and textiles, and therefore I started and founded the Weaver Studio way back in 1993, a space where traditional handloom techniques could be nurtured, artisans could work with dignity, and the past could meet the present in a dialogue of color, weave, and design. But as the work deepened, I felt an urgency to document not just the finished products, but the processes, voices, and vanishing knowledge systems behind them. The impulse gave rise to Weaver Studio Resource Center, which is a not-for-profit center and a trust which was set up way back in 2008, which became a living archive, a space for education, research, and preservation. Through WSRC, that is Weaver Studio Resource Center, the personal journey became a collective one. The textiles of my childhood, once folded in cupboards or draped on shoulders, took a new life as archival objects, historical records, and sources of inspiration. As I didn't come from a background of textiles and had no study in textiles, I came from a background of commerce, of management, of law. I felt that as I traveled and whatever I wanted to collect, to learn, something that I had a question about, is what I picked up along the way. And that's how the archives came to life. And I continue to find these echoes of my story and those countless others in these textiles that are at the archives. They chart not just the contours of cloth, but the threads of identity, of memory and responsibility that runs through generations. Next slide. We have this next slide already. So we were talking about how we see certain motifs again and again and again repeatedly in different textiles, not only in Indian textiles or Western textiles or Eastern textiles, but in many textiles. And at Weaver Studio Resource Center, the archives are not passive. They hold cultural and emotional intelligence. With over 1,500 textiles and 3,000 books, we function not as a static repository, but as a living, breathing space of memory, process, and preservation. We archive to remember, but it is also to resist forgetting. Each textile here is not merely an artifact. It is a vessel of meaning, of encoding knowledge, of forgotten narratives stitched into warp and weft. Motifs in particular are visual language. Take the paisley, for instance. It's referred to as a buta, as a keri, as a kolka. A motif is never just decorative, but it is declarative. The paisley curved teardrop form has traveled across the terrain from 1700 BCE Babylon to Mughal India and 19th century Scotland. So when you see a certain hand and you see this formation, it's when they used to print. This was the formation that came as a paisley. So it's traveled all the way from Persia through the Central Asian area to Kashmir, to making these beautiful Kashmir shawls in an extremely important trade textile that happened to be when the British colonial people, the French came, and we had many of them attracted to the textiles. They firstly came for the rich cultural heritage in textiles that we had in this country, and they took this shawls across to the UK, to London, to France, to other places, and then more and more demand came up. And when such demand came up, then we found that the machines also started to come up, and in town of Paisley in the UK, machine-made shawls, the Jamewar shawls became the machine-made shawls that came in large quantities and were distributed all over Europe and became extremely famous. And the town of Paisley in Scotland became extremely famous because of the motif that it was creating in the machine-made shawls that were called Paisleys, because Paisleys were not the original Jamewars. The Jamewar designs and the Jamewar craftsmen kind of lost their jobs and lost their, their creativity because of the cheaper machine-made shawls that came into the markets. But even as paisleys were reinterpreted on jacquard looms in Europe, their cultural depth remained rooted in Indian traditions. In Bengal's Jamdani saris, the kolka appears mirrored above the pallu, creating symmetrical tension and narrative elegance. If you could see the next slide. So here we have a Baluchari sari in mulberry silk, and we have these four important motifs in the palla, which are the paisleys, and in the center is a more quiet motif. This is a natural indigo Baluchar sari featuring delicate floral thread work and a striking archal. Archal is the end of the sari, and these are the kunja buttas. Centered is a contrasting nazar butta. So the color has changed in one of the motifs so as to keep away the evil eye. That is the story behind one of them being different from the rest. So we had many such different representations of this particular paisley motif. Can we see the next slide, please? Here we see that amongst the architectural structural Jamdani sari that we see here, amongst the pillars, we see these beautiful woven Jamdani motifs, which is the Jamdani is the supplementary weft motif, which you can see in this particular sari at the end. And these are 5 motifs, and at the end of the, and even just before the end, at the corners, you see the same different kind of paisleys that are put in. So paisley was a very important motif that was woven into different kinds of Indian textiles and of course world textiles. And here you see something very unusual is the boats. There were boats that were woven in, and this was a transition time when Muslims and Hindu workers were transitioning between them being, the Hindus turning to becoming Muslims and Muslims not wanting to weave any figurative motifs, to when this was the last of the saris that may have been woven by a Hindu or a Muslim weaver. We are not sure, but we think it's a Hindu weaver because it happened to be a representation of the Murshidabad. Mayur Ponki boat was a Mayur means a peacock, and this boat has figures of human figures, and this was one of the very rare pieces that we found, and it's probably woven on the other side in Dhaka in Bangladesh in the late 19th century. May we have the next slide, please? Here in a Katha, you can see it in a Nakshi Katha, where you can see the late 19th century Nakshi Katha from Bangladesh is a remarkable example of layered plain cotton, intricately hand-embroidered and quilted to create a rich textured textile. Part of the Weaver's Studio collection in Kolkata, the square Bostani Katha features concentric borders. You can see various borders that are going all around. The central motif is a lotus motif, and the paisleys, the kolkas, are at all 4 corners, but each of the corners are different. So in each katha textile is different from the next. There are no 2 identical kathas anywhere in the world. And this is one of the kathas which represents paisleys in different formats in the border and in the body of the textile. Can we go to the next one? Next slide, please.
Sorry.
Yeah. Here we find in the early mid-20th century, this is the pacha pere. Pacha pere meant that there was an additional border that was woven into the sari to enhance the shape when you drape the sari. It enhanced the shape of the woman's body when she wore and draped the sari in the Indian style. So here you see the paisleys are at the corners. You see the paisleys all along the border, all along the palla. And the sari is adorned as it's a Bengali drape, but it is customized for the Bengali market. And the palla of the sari is adorned with these rows of paisleys in gold. So this you see paisley in a different form in the Banaras textile. Next, please. Here we have a Doshala shawl, which is in wool. It's a twill weave from northern Kashmir, early 20th century. It's in our collection. And this woolen shawl, you can see how 5 rows, how different rows of paisleys are woven one direction to the left and one direction to the right. At the bottom, you see 5 in a row, then you see 5.5, then you see 5 again, and so that's the repeat. And this is extremely unusual to see the paisleys being woven in different directions and in this kind of a format. So we wanted to share this with you to say that paisleys came into a lot of textiles in their own way. It was an extremely popular motif that is revisited time and again. And on this shawl, there are 13 rows of these paisleys. Next slide, please. So after talking about the paisleys or the traditional textiles or what the Weaver Studio Resource Center has or what we presented at the exhibition that we revisited Bengal's textiles of shared legacies, just to bring back the attention to Bengal and to say that all of these techniques still exist, whether it's embroideries from the Mughal Karkhanas to the Jamdani fine 500 counts cotton, to all of the Katha embroideries, to the Zardozi, all of it still exists. And we worked on this with contemporary designers, with atelier homes, and with the traditional craftspeople to showcase that how heritage has shaped innovation. So we believe here that the future is intimately woven with the past. Our design thinking is rooted in heritage, not to replicate, but to reinterpret. Craft innovation doesn't emerge from erasure. It emerges from deeper understanding and listening. This philosophy guides our contemporary experiments where tradition is not a constraint, but a launching pad for new possibilities. Techniques like the pinched katha and the woven shibori are born from age-old practices. They have been practiced for a long time, but when we look at it and when we see what we know from our techniques and our heritage and our understanding, we kind of worked on it in a different manner and giving the freedom to the craft people for making that, making his or her understanding from what was presented through books and archival textiles. And these people innovated and thought and came up with new textiles by creating it on the loom, as we will see when we go along with the different presentations. We see circularity not just as sustainability, but this trend as an intrinsic to all the craft culture. Our waste to wealth initiatives like our patchwork textiles, all our leftover textiles are patched together, and these inspirations have come from Japan, from Korea, from various other countries where quilts are made with patchwork. In the Indian system also, fabrics which are old and torn are layered together and embroidered by the grandmother or the women in the family. So various projects that we have done have been sustainable, have been our initiatives have been so that we don't have any wastage and we have minimal carbon footprint to make sure that they're eco-friendly and they are biodegradable. Even if there is any wastage, it is biodegradable. And so we've continued to go back in time to understand and to learn and to revisit and to look at what the masters have taught us and to learn from those experiences and to try it in our contemporary practices. Community lies at the heart of this practice, whether it's reimagining the Baluchari sari into contemporary garments or commissioning new interpretations for the Bengal Textile Exhibition. We foster collaboration between weavers, designers, and thinkers. Our partnerships have extended from India's Charnakya School to our local collaborator, Bapa Aditya Biswas, to international labels across Europe and Japan. So we would like to go to the next slide, please. Here we were inspired during 2016 when we revisited the Baluchar project. Baluchari, the sari, which is a narrative silk and one of the only narrative silks of India. This textile had taken a back kind of space, and none of the documentation happened when the river changed course and Baluchar, the village, went under water. There was no such documentation which was left behind, and one of the last weavers passed on, and Dubraj Das died in 1903 without having to pass on his expertise of the Jala loom to any others. So this Baluchar exhibition was dedicated to revisiting the Baluchar and to bring about upgradation in the looms, to expose the craftspeople to all the new documentation that we had done of all the old textiles and Baluchars that were lying in all the museums, including the Gimme Museum and the National Museum and many other museums, and to come out with a catalogue, a book, and a symposium and exhibition, where at this point of time here, what we are showing in this slide is we gave traditional Baluchari textiles that were lying just in stock and in cupboards of many of the women, and they came and gave it to us, and it asked us to turn it into contemporary wearable textiles, and we then gave it to various other designers, and 16 designers came up with different ways how to drape these textiles in a contemporary manner, in an Indian fashion also and in the Western fashion also. So this collaboration was extremely eye-opening for many of the practitioners of that time to come up and use all the cloth that was lying in different cupboards and waste, and in collections and in handloom emporiums and in various other places and shops, to recreate it and to make it usable. So this was one of the efforts that was greatly appreciated, and we also were invited to the National Museum in Delhi to present this exhibition along with the collection of the National Museum. Next slide, please. Here you can see the transformation of the Baluchari and how DKNY for Vogue, the India Project Renaissance in 2012. This was published in October 2012 issue of the Vogue India. And this was a part of this project known for its intricate mythological motifs and silk brocades. This Baluchar was completely transformed into this kind of a Western garment, which was really appreciated, and the Western world started to look at the Indian textiles of this kind, which was narrative silk, which has mythological figures, which had storytelling, which has color, which is silk, which is a completely different narrative, that how it could be converted if there was no kind of restriction in the mind and there was no limitation to your imagination, how you could convert a sari into a garment of this kind. It marked a significant movement where heritage came and loom found a place in the on the global runway. So this was an extremely proud moment for India. May we look at the next slide, please? This is untitled, a tapestry created in 2024 by Karishma Swali and the Chanakya School of Craft. I'm deeply grateful to them for trusting us with this project, and we sent across tussar and muga yarn and the local yarn and stories and everything about Bengal, and Karishma went and saw the Portuguese textiles lying in the collections at Tapi in Mumbai, and saw the kolchas, and she wanted to pay an ode to the people of Bengal. So she chose this woodcut print which represents Sundarbans, and has embroidered this textile in a contemporary manner, where it goes away from just remaining as a wearable textile, but becomes an art textile. So how we find new markets was something that we wanted to explore, as at the end of every exhibition or every effort, the effort is to find more jobs, is to find more work for the people at the grassroots, to find more innovation, to find more markets. So interior designers, architects, and practitioners, and all of them came together, and we're very happy to see the possibilities that are there when tradition and innovation come together. And this was a contemporary reinterpretation which paid a tribute to historical textile exchanges while offering a visual narrative of the Sundarbans. The intricate stitching technique and layered motifs evoke the dense, biodiverse landscape of this unique region. Exhibited in Textiles from Bengal, a shared legacy in Kolkata in 2025, this piece blends history, memory, and ecological storytelling through craft. Next slide, please. This was an extremely interesting installation by Bappa Aditya Biswas. It's a striking reinterpretation of the traditional Jamdani technique, presented not as a flat textile, but as a fully formed garment woven directly on the loom. Made in West Bengal using linen, woolen felt, and metallic yarn, the zari, the piece is crafted in plain weave with supplementary weft. Jamdani being the supplementary weft, showcasing Biswas's signature blend of minimalism and innovation. By transforming Jamdani from a decorative fabric into a sculptural wearable form, the installation challenges conventional boundaries between textile, fashion, and art. The use of wool and metallic yarn introduces unusual textures and a modern sensibility while staying rooted in handloom practice. Part of the exhibition Textiles from Bengal, a shared legacy, this work exemplifies how age-old techniques can be pushed into new conceptual and material realms. It reflects a future-facing approach to heritage, one that treats the loom not just as a tool of tradition, but of transformation. May I request the next slide, please? Since we were looking at finding new markets, we explored the possibility of working with architects, interior designers, larger scale, more intense, challenging, and how could we raise the bar? How could we raise our standards? How could we enter new markets? How could we get more work and translate and transfer that work into to the grassroots, to the craft people who've made this textile? So this collaboration is not an afterthought. It is a core of our creative practices. We co-create these narratives with designers where tradition becomes a springboard for innovation. This belief shapes how we engage with contemporary design thinkers who are looking to root their work in authenticity with pushing boundaries. So we wove the base fabric and then we used it to hand paint it. This is from the Abin Design Studio, and Abin Chaudhary is a very well-known architect of not only Bengal but of India, and has received many awards and has been recognized for his fantastic thought process and work in architecture and interior design. And here we found that because of the work that we needed to do and the size, he helped us to break it into smaller panels. And each of these panels was hand painted, textured, hand embroidered, and paneled into these panels and made as an art textile for a contemporary space. So these co-created pieces have found homes in wardrobes and museums alike, engaging new markets and audiences across India and abroad. In bridging the past and the future, Weaver Studio ensures that craft knowledge remains both preserved and diametrically alive, continuously reimagined through dialogue, experimentation, and deep-rooted collaboration. Next slide, please. Here again, we have this hand-painted indigo katha panel. The creation of this piece was an intricate 13-week journey, beginning with a careful joining of the handloom panels to achieve the required monumental scale and the scale, a technical challenge that requires precision and calculation and expert stitching. The resulting canvas spans multiple meters, pushing the boundaries of traditional handloom limitations. We hand-painted the commissioned design with indigo, natural indigo, using a specialized sponge technique, and that creates depth through varying indigo saturations. Elevated through the application of katha embroidery, it had a raised 3D effect, and there were thousands of precise running stitches to create delicate abstract motifs floating across this entire indigo expanse. The intensive handwork, totaling 450 craft hours, adds both texture, complexity, and narrative depth to the piece. Next slide, please. This angular patchwork chair, when we saw this shape, we were a little bit stunned and surprised and taken aback. It was commissioned in 2025, recently. This angular patchwork chair is a bold fusion of form and craft, designed to be both functional and sculptural. Created by Weaver Studio for Abin Design Studio, the chair's striking silhouette and unconventional geometry make it an instant conversation starter. This chair has been shown and awarded at various interior design and architectural exhibitions and spaces, and has received a lot of interest, as well as multiple orders in different colors. And this is crafted by extremely skilled artisans, and also furniture, the person who designed and carved out this wood, to the tailor who put it together, to the person who fused the textile, to the person who cut it and actually stitched it to the size and the way it has been done. So it was a collaboration of so many people who came together, and it was a project where we were also upcycled the small pieces. We had lots of small remnants and pieces from our wearable textile collections, we have put this together and made this landscape textile, and then we've cut and stitched it, and it worked perfectly well. It was a one of a kind, and it's interplaying the textures and the colors. And it's for this collaboration and the material reuse and the Abin Design Studios architectural boldness to present it, where every angle and stitch speaks of culture, craftsmanship, and contemporary design thinking. Can we go to the next slide, please? A couple of years ago, at the Lakme Fashion Week, we were always known as people who were experts at making the textile, the uncut cloth, but not so much at the fashion. So when I was approached for participating at the Lakme Fashion Week in 2016, I approached a very dear friend and a leading designer from India, not only Kolkata, but India, Anamika Khanna. And she kind of guided our textiles, which was Shibori and Jamdani. And the juxtaposing of our work that we were doing in Japan, our exports to Japan, our work that we do for Japan, the intricate shibori that we learned from Japan, which we now sell to Japan, and the Jamdani weave, which were creating in our at our various looms in the state of West Bengal. We came together and we designed certain textiles, about 14 textiles, and each of these textiles came out wonderfully in the collaboration of how a textile designer and a fashion designer can put together something for the ramp which is living even today. And this is so classic that we made more than 100 pieces of this collection, and in this collection was 14 to 16 pieces, and we've repeatedly been getting orders which says that contemporary textiles over time and classical textiles over time and collaborations can be revisited and can be made stronger as year on year. So it was a wonderful experience. And now coming to the last slide. I'd like to end with this slide. The archive of the future is not a cupboard of folded silk. It is a living, breathing space of memory, process, and people. Each time we archive a textile, we are not just preserving a thread, we are preserving a world view. In this archive, the loom is as important as the language spoken besides it. The hand that weaves is as vital as the weave itself. We must begin to document the intangible, the pauses in speech when a weaver recalls a lost motif, the rhythm of dying chants, the evolution of a design through collaboration, oral histories, material experiments, failures, and restorations must all find a voice and a place. This is how we build a hybrid model of scholarship, one that holds space for intuition as much as for information. To preserve cloth without preserving care is preserving the care is to miss the heart of the craft. The next archive must safeguard empathy, ethics, and slow, attentive labor that sustains tradition. The future of textiles depends on how we tell their stories and who we honor in the telling. Let us archive not just what is beautiful, but what is essential. Let us make room for new voices so the fabric of memory remains whole, woven with continuity, humility, and hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darshan. It was inspiring to see the passion that drives you to really create what you've done with the archives, look at keeping the skill, the craftsmanship, and then ensure that you find new ways to use that skills into different platforms and support. So congratulations on what you've done. I know that this conversation after Aurélie's presentation is going to be fascinating. But now let's go to Aurélie.
I hope so.
I'm sure it will. Aurélie.
Okay. Thank you, Darshan. And really, it's interesting because I think it's really fun. I will show you how these textiles became a source of inspiration for fashion in France. And you will see that all these examples shown by Darshan became not only a source, but a very important way of how textiles dip into the culture. Because to be honest, in France, we don't know very well textiles. And we don't have a very old tradition of keeping Indian textiles. Why? One of the, I think, the more efficient example is Guimet Museum. At Guimet Museum, we didn't have any textiles. Émile Guimet, when he traveled in all around Asia, I think he didn't think about it, and he thought maybe textile was not as important as sculpture or painting, and he decided not to buy textiles. So it means that until 2003, until this woman, Krishna Ribu, decided to give her whole collection to Guimet, we didn't have a textile collection, and we didn't have any textiles. A small part of them, some Japanese textiles, because Japanesism was very important in France, but no Indian textiles. So I think it's really important to say that, because it means that until that time, textiles have been considered as minor art. And when Krishna Ribu was a famous collector, because maybe you know her. She was Indian. She was born in Dhaka in 1926. She was a great niece of Rabindranath Tagore. And she began her collection to preserve, exactly as you do, Darshan, to preserve the know-how and the skills of Indian textiles, especially the Indians from her region, Bengal. You have the example of the first piece of her collection, the AEDTA 1. You see it with the number of Guimet, and it is a balucha from Murshidabad. So she decided to preserve this know-how. She began her collection in the 50s, and she finished to have about 4,000 textiles of all around Asia. And when she decided to give her collection, she decided to give it to Guimet, which is a general museum, not a textile museum, to prove that textiles is exactly at the same level of painting, sculpture, and major art. So she played a very important role in the recognition of textiles, and especially Indian textiles. She found it, am I clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Please don't hesitate to interrupt me. So it means that when she decided to collect in the 50s, she created an association, today closed because she gave all her collection to Guimet, the AEDTA, Association for Study of Ancient Textiles. It was Avenue de Breteuil in Paris in the 7th district. And she organized a lot of exhibition. You have an example here, inaugurated by André Malraux. And the Musée Guimet, to thank her, of course, of this very important gift, create a gallery dedicated to Krishna Ribu collection on the first floor at the museum. I'm sure you have visited. It's a gallery dedicated to decorative art. It means that we only have in Guimet a gallery dedicated to Indian textiles and not to all Asian textiles. But it means a lot, because I think it's the less known textiles in France. And I wanted to begin with that because when today a lot of designers are inspired by Indian, they ask to go to Guimet to see the collection. And when I was a curator, I have been requested very often to show the collection. I can't say who, but I have been requested a lot. And they have a true source of inspiration now, which was not the case at the beginning of the 20th century. Because even if we don't know very well India in France, we have a periodicity of influence. And the first of them was at the beginning of the 20th century, in the 20s, where some of the couture house or luxury brand decided to pay a legacy to India. And one of the first of them was Guerlain. You know, the Guerlain, the very famous perfume. And when they decided to launch Shalimar, the perfume was inspired by Shah Jahan and her wonderful wife, Mumtaz Mahal, for her, you know that, for whom she decided to create the Taj Mahal. So it was, as you can see, on the poster and the communication campaign, it's an imaginary India. It's not a true India because, to be honest, I don't find any link between Taj Mahal and the Shalimar bottle or the Shalimar perfume. The Shalimar, as you know, I'm sure, was the garden of Shah Jahan, for Jahangir, sorry, the father of Shah Jahan. And I think it evokes the dream, it evokes exoticism, and it's really a recomposition of India. It's not true India. And it was exactly the case at that time for all the couture house, except sometimes, and I'm sure, Darshan, you can recognize a textiles, an Indian textiles. I think it was a sari. I'm not sure because I didn't see it in real. I only see it on the book. Some of the couturier, of the designer of the beginning of the 20th century, for example, Deuillet, who disappeared completely today, tried to recreate a dress based on a true Indian textiles. It was quite new at that time. And I'm not sure they knew exactly what was the first use of these textiles. But it's interesting to show what was the example in the 20s. And the relationship with India was not really obvious at that time because we only have some commercial relationship with India. But one thing interesting, and I am today, as you know, director of Louis Vuitton collection, I have discovered that since the 20s, Louis Vuitton create for the biggest Maharaja and rulers of North India, some of trunks, very specific trunks. And the thing's interesting is it has been adapted. It means that it was not only to sell some crates of bags from Louis Vuitton, but to answer to a specific request. For example, the tea case for the Maharaja of Baroda, it was a request specific for him with a construction dedicated to the tea and to his recommendation. So it's interesting to show these exchanges. And maybe, I don't know if everybody knows that we established this type of relationship from the beginning of the 20th century. But it was only for a small part of Indian people, only Maharaja, maybe because they were the only one who have the richness to order this type of things. But also because I'm not sure a lot of brands at that time had the ability to propose something adapted to the Indian market, because it's very specific. And today, it's the same things. It's very complicated to reach Indian people because the market is very specific and we can't sell everything in India. And I think it's important to remind that it's very specific and we need to adapt sometimes the things to il faut peut-être brancher. I think we have to connect it. Sorry. Because Okay. Sorry. So, I mean, the adaptation is very rare in the brand, and maybe the reason why we don't have a lot of French product today and a lot of French fashion who's selling in India. I try to hurry because I have a lot of things to tell you, but I think it's interesting to see this overview because between the 20s, where we established a kind of relationship, to the 50s, we didn't have a lot of things inspired by India. We have only one example of Schiaparelli. You know Schiaparelli, one of the most important brands of fashion, but especially Dior. Dior was fascinated by India and especially by the craft of India. And you can recognize on this slide in the middle a sari, which is not a real sari, as you can see, but an adaptation of sari and based on the technique of Jamdani textile. So it means that he knew what was Jamdani textiles and what was the muslin brocaded in India by Lame Or. But we don't know where he saw it, where he discovered this type of textiles. It was the same in the 90s for Saint Laurent. but maybe I will show you after other examples. In reality, you have two men because you have two men clothes in India. Some are not sewn, draped, and some are sewn. And both of them were a source of inspiration. But the most part was the draped sari, not only because it's a sari, but because the draped costume remind also a source of Greek inspiration. So both of them was a source for Chanel, for example, or Jean-Paul Gaultier, or even though Hermès and Alexander McQueen. But I think the most important part of influence is the pyjama, kurta, the very, how to say that, the very heavy dresses and coats made for Maharaja. Because I think in France, during many years, India was Maharaja. It was not South India, it was not Hinduism, it was not the knowledge of the culture of India. It was only Maharaja because it was the field that made dream everybody. So it means that for all the fashion designer, especially Saint Laurent, who never visit India, to be honest, you have to know that they never visit India. None of them. They never been to India. They discovered India in books only. And if Saint Laurent told that before, my best travels, I made it in my coach with my book. He never traveled and he hates to travel. So he discovered India, China, Japan in books. He went to China, but it was at the end of his life. So for him, what was India? India was Maharaja, and you can realize here that he didn't know that turban, for example, even if I know turban can be worn by women, but here he adapted masculine garments to women, and he transformed his idea of India. And the kurta pajama was really one of the sources. And I think maybe the reason is in the 60s and after the 70s, India became fashionable with the hippies and all this movement. And in Paris, we had a man very interesting, the Baron de Rédé. I don't know if you know the Baron de Rédé. He had, the very important Hôtel Particulier, Le Vau, on the island of Saint-Louis. And he organized some very famous party. And one of them in 1969 was dedicated to India. And since this time and this event, India became really fashionable. And then you can see, and it's funny because it's Vuitton, I just discovered this image. They invent a story on a Maharani whose name is Virginie, who is not very Indian, dressed in sari, guest house of a car with his Vuitton trunk. So at that time, it became really fashionable in France, and we discovered a world not very well known before. And you can see other examples, Givenchy, Dior, or Jean-Paul Gaultier, with an imaginary India, again, but with a better maybe knowledge of how the textiles was, because you can recognize true sari with anchala, at the border, with true turban, with brocaded textiles. So, I'm late.
No.
What is so it means that the imaginary India, or this true maybe influence on Indian arts, means that they didn't know the exact object. But it was not the case for all of them. For example, and I discovered that very recently, Jeanne Lanvin, the designer Jeanne Lanvin of the beginning of 20th century, had a collection of Indian textiles. And they called me, the brand, to ask me to identify the textiles. And you can recognize on it, you have brocaded sari from Varanasi, I think, Benares. You have Kutch dresses from Gujarat, and some other bandani textiles, of course. And I didn't identify all of them. It means that Jeanne Lanvin, one of the earliest designer who decided to collect textiles, especially Indian textiles. Nobody knows, and I think we really need to publish that because I'm sure everybody will be interested, I hope, on this subject. And she designs in the 20s, we don't know exactly the precise date, a garment called Jaipur, which is not really from Jaipur, and truly, really very recognizable, influenced by her honor collection, her proper collection. And of course, during all the 20th century, a lot of jewelry designer, and
We did a conference.
you did a conference, absolutely, as Cartier and other of them were inspired, but don't forget that Cartier traveled to India. So it was a truly source observed on Indian jewelry he found in India. So it's different. And even Yves Saint Laurent, if he never traveled to India, he made precise researches in his books to try to adapt some paintings, some elements of decorative arts he was fascinated in. And it's my proposition and it's my research. So I don't know if I'm truth, but I don't know what do you think, but I think it's obvious that there is something because he was fascinated to Ajanta Cave. This is Ajanta Caves. Maybe you recognize it, constructed by the Gupta rulers. And when I saw these 60s dresses, I think the position of the woman, the type of the dress, the neck, skin, sorry. You can see that for me, it has been influenced by this position and this dancer. And during the history of Dior with Marc Bohan, who were influenced by Botte, Botte was Botte or Presley, was a motif very characteristic. And all the designers tried to reproduce this botte, this very specific design, woven not only on the cashmere shawl, but most of part was on the cashmere shawl. And you know that this cashmere shawl was very fashionable at the 18th century, what a lot of women decided to wear cashmere shawl. So I wanted to show you some examples because I think it's interesting to see. I don't know why ça s'est superposé. Oh, don't worry. To see that Boucheron, Bulgari, Van Cleef & Arpels, and a lot of brands have been influenced by India, but we sometimes we don't know who was the source because we don't know yet very well Indian textiles. And I think, I don't know what do you think of this example, but for me it's obvious. And Darshan, maybe you didn't know that, but Hermes, you know, when they create, I don't know the date exactly, but I think it was in the 80s, maybe end of 80s. They create this carré Hermès, and I think it's obvious they have been inspired by a Kanta, no? That's very, very strange and very new because sometimes we don't know exactly the source.
I want to make a comment, I think. Darshan, you wanted to say something?
Yes, we have a katha which is very similar, which I showed of what Hermès has done in this print. I mean, of course, those two similar kathas, but as you can see, it has the central medallion, it has the four corners, which are the paisleys, and it's got these folk motifs, and of course, they put the H, their logo all over, but it definitely is a representation of a katha.
Yeah, and Kanta, I think the only connection in France is in Guimet and was belonged to first to Krishna Ribou. Nobody knows very well Kanta, and we never have exhibition or something. So I really don't know how Hermès decided to copy, because it's not really a copy, but it's a reinterpretation, let's say, but it's inspiration, to be honest. Really, it's very close. And I think nobody knows that. So it's really a new subject. No, but absolutely, I have to ask them, but now it's very difficult because I'm at Louis Vuitton, so I can't ask Hermès. And here, another example, Dries van Noten, it's a renewed designer. He cut really he cut these dresses, not really dresses, as you can see, on an Indian textiles. But we know that he has a collection, and I had a discussion with him, and he has a huge collection. And I was a little bit surprised that he decided to cut archives, old textiles, to create new ones. And it's a true subject, because to be inspired with the things, to cut an old textiles is another thing. And this is another example of Marc Jacob for Louis Vuitton. And you can recognize that these textiles are old. It's archives. Here you have a brocaded textiles, I think from Varanasi. I think so. And this is, I don't know, what do you think, Darshan? But I think it's a Jamdani.
No, this is also from Banaras, but on the right-hand side, you see the silver and gold. That is what was used. It was used in the skirts of the Jaipur women, where this gota was used. This was called gota, a silver and gold metal threads.
I wasn't sure, so I wanted to have your opinion. And it was for Diwali collection. So it was dedicated to India because they decided to make a collection for Diwali. But, for me, it's an interesting work, but it's a shame to cut some old textiles. I am curator of archives, old textiles. But it's an example of how archives can help the knowledge of textiles. For me, I prefer this type of inspiration with Kim Jones, for Louis Vuitton as well. I think it's obvious that he has been inspired by the Lahria textiles. And for example, this skirt from Rajasthan belongs to Krishna Ribu, now kept at Guimet Museum, or another example with Nicolas Ghespierre. So today, how, and it was one of your questions, but how finally luxury can protect and maybe can be a part of transmission between archives and know-how, craftsmen and luxury, and how to preserve craftsmanship with luxury. I think we had example in the history of fashion, but not enough, for sure. I don't know if you know this fashion show of Yves Saint Laurent in 1989. Yves Saint Laurent was one of the first one who was interesting to India, of course, but decided to organize a fashion show in India. At the gate of India, you can recognize he made two fashion show, and he was the first to organize this fashion show, but to hire Indian models. Because this is the things I think very important for me, because Yves Saint Laurent thought that beauty is universal. And it's not linked to the color of a skin or to a country. So beauty should be universal. And when he decided to hire Indian models, it's because he thought when you are in a country, you need to present the garments, even if it's not Indian collection, because in India, it was not only Indian collection, it was a collection of all his career, but should be worn by people on the country, because it's a way to understand and to better understand the history of a textiles. It's to adapt to the country and to deep into the country. And he was the first one to recognize the beauty of Indian as well. So I think he was one of the first to do that, even if it's not, I think, enough at that time. After that, but a long time after that, luxury brands began to hire and to work with Indian embroiderer and Indian craftsmen, because they think that the collaboration and to avoid appropriation, because it's not only an inspiration and suddenly to not to steal, but a little bit, to steal the know-how of a country, but to collaborate with the country and to create together a new creativity. And I think this is the future, to establish a true relationship between a country and a know-how, and it will help to preserve it. But to create, because creativity is in the two sides. I thank you for your attention. I hope it was clear.
It was very clear. Thank you very much.
This is a lot. Maybe I can just
Another one.
No, it was just to leave for the discussion and maybe to have your idea on this adaptation Louis Vuitton. It's not because I work for Louis Vuitton. It's because this one is a very funny one. It's interesting because it's another thing. It's another commission. It's Wes Anderson, the realizator, the movie maker, of the Darjeeling Limited, who ordered to Vuitton this set of luggages inspired by Indian motifs. It's, again, other things, but it's to show you how finally we can create relationship between craft of India and our own craft. But it's just for a discussion. I think it's a funny one.
That's good. And it's a good way to wrap your presentation. Thank you, Aurélie. And there is actually,
I am on time.
there is actually an online question that builds up on what you just said, and I would love to have your opinion as well as Darshan's opinion. An anonymous question: how should brands effectively work with artisans to modernize textile pattern but still honor tradition and the cultural source? So it's really, how can the brand really do that? I mean, you've answered it already quite a bit, but it's really honor tradition, cultural source, but modernize the pattern at the same time. Because at the end of the day, there have been exchanges between Bengal and Europe, especially the UK. It was a major source of export from India to the UK of fabric. And there was orders with patterns done for the UK. So that has already inspired, that's already changed things. So how to modernize that? How do we,
But shall we modernize that?
I know, that's the whole question.
Because
I spent 10 years in Singapore as a French person who worked more in the Chinese ceramics culture. And through Singapore, I traveled to India a lot, so I saw totally before I even knew that it was the most extraordinary textile ever woven. And my Indian friend in Singapore took me to all the major weaving Kutch, Chitwan, the other stuff. So I discovered textiles from Asia. And I must say, not on a high luxury level, but on an everyday level, you do have modern textiles that are modern, but more mid-range, more niche. You find it in Burma, in Indonesia. You find it in India as well. I think before talking right straight up to the super luxury brand, there are down to earth. And I'm sure Darshan works with smaller brands, something that you might find in a 6,000 small in Paris. Maybe not on that hotel. And then you really see the difference. I found Pondicherry was a place where there was a lot of creativity in the textiles. And the cuts, unfortunately for me, my arms are too thick, like the Indian textiles, so I get away with more cheaper version like I would end up buying my stuff in Paris with Indian textiles but cut for me. And I think maybe before going, there's a whole middle range of textiles, and that's where the craftsmen start getting very, very creative. And the other thing I'd like to say, because Moussage had a lot of exhibitions I discovered French embroidery and was amazed by these old samples only because I was lucky enough to know about Indian embroidery and Indian textile. I think it goes both ways. I think the French, the luxury brands in France have preserved a very upscale skill set. Maybe that's a challenge for India today to preserve these.
Absolutely.
And before you answer, Darshan, did you hear what was said?
No, I'm very sorry, but I just couldn't get that.
That was my concern.
Yes.
Can
you summarize 2 sentences?
Yeah.
Hold on.
If you can just tell me in brief, I'm fine with that.
Hold on, we have to repeat
Sorry.
in a shorter way.
So thank you, Darshan, for your talk. I discovered textiles living in Singapore, and I was lucky to go every year to India. So, for example, I went to a patola weaver before I even knew how precious and extraordinary those textiles are. So I've discovered European textiles through the Asian prism. And what I'm saying, we're talking about high luxury brands, but I find there are a lot of everyday brands or more upscale Main Street brands that probably are trying to do what you do, which are trying to modernize the ancient techniques and push the craftsmen to move out of tradition and to adapt a bit to the time, this in-between phase. And the other thing I was saying, because we have some extraordinary exhibitions in Paris, I looked at Le Sage embroideries, old samples, amazed, only because I had been to India and seen all of your craft. So maybe the way the French managed to preserve the very upscale craftsmanship, maybe that's a real challenge for India to be able to preserve these extraordinary crafts and knowledge, what you're doing.
Yeah, but we've done it very successfully, and we showcased it in this recent exhibition of textiles from Bengal, a shared legacy. And we continue to embroider, to block print, to hand paint, to do kalamkari, to do all the weaving, to all the techniques that continue to be there. We have now we have more ways in which it's being assisted, and it's making a better situation for and surroundings for the craft people to be more comfortable, to be paid better, to be more fair, to be getting the exposure, to visit the exhibitions, to get awards, to be recognized. And I feel that it does definitely need understanding. It needs a kind of it needs respect, it needs a study, and it needs appreciation, and it needs the knowledge to be able to see that what is it that we have already, and we've already had for so many centuries, and what is it that we can continue to do, and also revisit those areas where we find that it is coming down in quantity, and the reason for which it's coming down in quantity, what is that is impacting these embroideries or techniques or crafts or textiles, is the main thing where such organizations like ours, as well as many others, come together along with the Western world to take into account that how is it best that we can collaborate with fair practices, with respect, with understanding, with where global rivalry is going to endure only when they have a story to tell, when there's a soul to the story, and the skills that our artisans have. If that could get converted into what is the vision of these great designers, not only in India but in the West, and take it to the global markets, I definitely think personally that these collaborations are extremely important for us to grow and for us to sustain and for us to continue to keep these crafts alive. So it's happening, it's possible, it's got a great future. There are hiccups on the way, but we have to face it because it's tough times, tough markets, reduction in kind of mass consumerism, consumption is reduced, but luxury continues to interest those who really can be the patrons and those who can help us with this kind of continuity, because we do not have that mass scale embroiderers who are able to do that, embroiderers or weavers or block printers who are able to do that level of perfection that used to be there, but we are trying to bring it back by showing these examples to them in various forms as much as we can through our archives, our museums, our exhibitions, and exposing the public to learn to appreciate more and not to bargain when they come to an Indian store. The first thing they do is they start bargaining. They're asking for discount, not realizing. So we want to tell the backstories. The new digital world is really helping us to tell all these stories, to share with them that what goes into a textile, into a product, into creating, into making, and more appreciation is coming forth. And I think we should just continue to believe and continue to move forward. That's the only way to, continue to sustain what we have.
Right. Is there any question within the room? You might want to ask. We're looking at things online too, questions online.
I have a historical question. What's the link between Persia, Zoroastrianism, and the botte or the motif, the paisley motif?
It's come from Russia.
It comes from Zoroastrianism?
Darshan, you agree?
Yeah. No,
First of all, it comes from Persia, and I think it has been imported to India through the Mughal. If I'm not wrong, Darshan, because I don't want to say.
It comes from Persia and it's continued, and we can see it, like I showed it, I could show you 100 textiles in which the paisley is present, whether it's in the Kashmir shawl or in the Kanjivarams, to the Upadas, to the Paitanis, to the Jamdanis, to hand block printed textiles, to embroidered textiles, to kathas, to name it, and we have the paisley as an extremely strong motive, connection, and memory, history, craft, technique, trade, connections. All of this comes together when we study the paisley.
Just one something, because we have a remark online. Véronique Paul's mentioned Mohanji, of course, who play a very important role in the production of textiles. And my goal was to show the national collection, because it was a lack for the collection, and it was important, but the most part of the designers, if I'm not wrong, were inspired by not true textiles, but books. It's the reason why maybe I didn't want to mention it, but of course it's a very important character in the relationship between India and France. And Darshan, if I may, I have a question. If I can ask.
I think your work is quite important, and to answer on all these questions, what is your goal now? Have you been requested yet to luxury brand in France, to fashion house, to help them to create maybe a relationship or creation relationship? Or is it in your perspective to do that, to help us to create with your ability and to be part of this recognition? Because I know I am in a brand now, and I have been working for Yves Saint Laurent, as you know, and I know that everybody here today want to create something durable and sustainable. It means that we really need you today, even if I'm specialized in Indian textiles, so I'm pursued of what I'm saying. But I'm trying to explain to everybody, and I think now everybody's aware of that. They want to work with India to create something new and to establish a new relationship.
Yes, I mean, I'm absolutely, the first thing when this webinar came up, I was so happy that I got this opportunity given to me by Asia Society to be a part of this webinar and to be able to have this conversation with you, because it gives, it opens up a completely different way in which collaboration can go forward, plus my thinking, and being at the age that I am, I've moved from too much of commerce to trying to document, which is very, very important now because very little of it has been documented. I've started the research on the second publication, which is again coming up by the end of next year, which is documenting everything that was not put in the first publication. And this way we are going into many private homes, collections, craftspeople's homes, listening to their stories, recording their voices, some oral histories. There are people who are 95 and 96 who are alive and who are able to tell us and remember and give us so many leads and information and skill kind of sets that they had, and showing us so many samples, small little pieces. So I think it's a fantastic time and a very exciting time in the global textile world of textiles and fashion that I don't think there's any other way to move forward but to collaborate, and to do that with keeping consciously in mind that backward integration is as important as forward integration. So as we go forward with brands and designing and collaboration and fashion, etc., you also have to remember that at the grassroots there are these people without whom we are not going to be able to do what we are dreaming to do or what we are planning or hoping to do. So therefore, this integration is extremely important, and organizations and people who are seeped in this. There are hundreds and hundreds of young people in India, young designers, practitioners, senior people also, those who are now understanding the importance of archives, importance of documentation, importance of how it is scholarship is so important to be able to actually bring weightage to the work that one is doing. And recording these stories, telling these stories, sharing it with the world makes it much more valuable, makes them feel much more connected. So the person who's buying and who's a patron understands the story behind it, so the effort behind it, and comes forward. You know, we all have to come forward to be able to preserve what is our history, and what is our techniques, and what is our expertise, and continue to hone it. So without having too many conditions of commerce to be constantly driving us, I feel we can do better without only commerce driving us. So it could be a simultaneous effort between the profit and the not-for-profit, between the archives and the current contemporary world, between textiles and fashion, to come together in a manner where there is complete synergy, harmony, and a way to move forward, keeping in mind all those values, all those principles, and all those stories, all the efforts, all the hard work that has gone in for centuries and centuries, which lets us come to a platform like this to even have a conversation.
Thank you. We have to create something new.
Yes.
And this is what Asia Society is all about, creating bridges between Asia and France. So if that can result into something concrete, just talk, that's already an achievement.
Great.
Yeah. And there was actually a comment from one person online saying, if the EU designer starts working with the Indian artisan, that would be an amazing push to the arts.
Yeah.
And we all agree on that.
Absolutely.
With partnership, that things happen. So let's continue.
I think in the future.
Yes.
Great.
Any other question?
No, I just have a comment. I feel that the markets that the Western designers and their couture houses have set up and worked at over the last 100+ years is something that we in India have not been able to do. And I feel that this kind of a partnership and help, as well as collaboration, would really take this entire story to a different level, you know, which is going to be only a win-win for all of us.
Yeah.
Darshan, maybe you have one question to Aurélie.
Yes, sir. Aurélie, I actually had many, but I will ask her this question. You know, you have such fantastic archives, and I wanted to know whether this is in the public domain or it is not in the public domain. It is only for the use of the internal kind of design and fashion section.
No. Unfortunately, it's not in the public domain because it's private archives. But of course, if you come to France, it will be an honor to show you all the archives. No, but it's usually shown for exhibitions. And we are thinking about to establish maybe visible storages. But for now, it's private. So it's impossible to see it if you're not in the brand.
We appreciate your being online and the sharing that you did, and more importantly, all the work that you're doing. So it's fantastic. Thank you all for coming online and in the room. You've got the contacts here in case you need to join us for anything. Meanwhile, have a good afternoon and a good Printemps Asiatique. Enjoy Asia in Paris.
And don't forget, next Wednesday.
And don't forget, sorry, next Wednesday, we've got a beautiful conference on Japanese lacquer, urushi lacquer, with a living legend from Japan, Morose-san, and the ouvrier Catherine Nicolas, who is the main ouvrier de France on urushi lacquer. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Enjoy Printemps Asiatique.
Thank you.